Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was great for the progression of Arkham Batman. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could Harley carrying him out back, placing him on that bench and pulling back on that silver-clad trigger ever possibly be a good thing for the prominent narrative, the character of the Dark Knight? Well, if I'm being honest, it's not. Don't get me wrong, in my playing of the game, it more or less made sense to me why or how it happened, but that was never the thing that vexed me. Or, at the very least, the thing that caused me to ponder if they really ruined him. Ruined Batman. Batman getting beat didn't ruin Batman. Brainiac mind controlling him into a killer, while maybe not the best idea, didn't ruin Bruce. The peeling of the surface that is this game, the unearthing of Arkham Knight's ending, the collection of the new lore under the guise of interview tapes are all the things required to really grasp what I'm getting at. I'll also be focusing on the return of the Caped Crusader, his abandonment of his reacquired anonymity, the major themes behind each of the games and why they all ultimately culminated in this path of rebirth, renewal for the Caped Crusader. There's a funny thing about change. Did you really see it? You have to go back, way back to the beginning. I think almost everyone here knows the origin of Batman, the most intrinsic part of his character within every form of his media. The death of Bruce's parents created a void, a dark passenger of sorts, that had gone to drive Bruce's development in his childhood, leading into his initiation journey, where he would use this anger, fear, and lust for vengeance in his eventual pursuit of justice, donning the mantle of the Bat at the age of 25, which would immediately insert him as a premier symbol within Gotham's greater mythos. But it wasn't enough. Sure, a few criminals were afraid, the topic of discussion when involving crime generally revolved around him, but he was still in the shadows, only a myth that everyone should fear, not there to inspire hope, galvanize Gotham, only there to enforce his wrath. Beware the Batman. This ended up having the adverse effect on Gotham by the night of Christmas Eve, where the antithesis of the Bat, the clown, under the guise of Black Mask, shined a light on this emblem of fear to attract several other dangers, some of whom had their own journeys or crusades that would greatly benefit in the face of Batman's death. Deathstroke and Shiva, two world-class assassins who shared a constant need to better themselves by the day, and Bane, the dark twisted mirror of Bruce, a man whose mission to upend the corruption brought about by the evils who tortured him in Santa Prisca devolved in his becoming obsessed, consumed by his fear of the Bat, vengeance that he believed would ultimately grant him the peace he so desperately craved. His actions, coupled with his heightened addiction, completely bastardized the original intent of his mission. He became no different than the very corruption that created his circumstances in the first place. It's the counterintuitiveness of his and Bruce's actions when pertaining to their deeper goals that underlie a connection between the two, a connection that I'll resurface later in this video. Moving on, Batman was alone. He had no allies outside of Alfred, who Bruce himself didn't even factor into his crusade early game, which Alfred described as a losing battle. This is important because his two greatest adversaries, Joker and Bane, didn't only push his no-kill rule to its limit through cunning and physicality, but also made him question the validity of everything he does. This resulted in Batman almost calling it quits after Alfred narrowly escaped the clutches of death in his own home, until the surmounted failures of the past 2 years paired with Alfred's words enforced his belief in needing allies to make a difference. There's only so much one man can do in the face of everyday horrors, and Batman, while very powerful, is still exactly that. One person. Positive change can only happen with the belief of change, and having allies single-mindedly devoted into making this change happen come hell or high water is the textbook definition of hope. It's at this point we see Batman's taking down of Bane and Joker while remaining true to himself and his morals, and still hope deep down in the heart of Jim Gordon and eventually in the collective unconscious of Gotham. The story of Origins is very important because it actualizes 3 major themes. A Batman without hope is a Batman of pure vengeance, of fear, and that Batman's allies essentially serve as a lifeline to said hope.
I bring a message. Dark days are coming, Batman. The prophecy is coming true. You are the warrior who will close the gates of hell. You are the one who will save this day. And in doing so, events will occur that you cannot stop. From the ashes of Arkham, the fires will rage and Gotham will burn. And you will burn too.
Let's start with Batman Arkham VR, which grants us some much needed insight to the mental of Batman. After being poisoned by the Joker's infected blood, Batman starts realizing that he's losing control. He's becoming Joker. What had likely begun with short bouts of random violent impulses and sketchy weapon choices have fully crept deep into his subconscious, actualized through dreams of him killing his own son, Nightwing, his greatest ally who has kept Batman hopeful, on top of his beating down of Tim Drake. the one who allowed him to continue on after the loss of Jason. This causes Batman to become distant, to forget the lesson Alfred imparted on him all the way back in Arkham Origins. He pushes everyone away due to his fear of losing them. Something that Batman can't afford to do now, since the gates of hell that Azrael talked about in City reimagined two great threats, every bit as deadly as the Joker. Instead of putting his full trust in his allies in such a vital moment, his mutated Joker infection coupled with Scarecrow's cloudburst caused Bruce to single-handedly shoulder the burden of protecting Gotham whilst being pushed to his utmost limits against a literal army. I've gone on about Batman and what he had to deal with throughout the events of the night, but I haven't touched on something that's equally as important as Batman's struggle, which are the goals of Scarecrow surmised to these: to destroy the symbol of Batman and the hope that it represents, and to force Batman to succumb to his fear. By the end of the night, with a little help of course, Batman does triumph over the threat of Scarecrow and his Joker infection, but in a way, Scarecrow still won. Batman faked his death and abandoned every ally but Alfred, completely taking the 360 back to his origin days. The symbol of hope that Batman once wore is now dead, once again only being a symbol of fear through the medium of a new entity, who even took up the methods of the crazed Scarecrow through the use of fear toxin. At this point, he's no different than his origin self. No, he's in a far more broken state. He's not even Vengeance, or really Batman for that matter. Narratively speaking, he's Bane, someone who also completely lost every semblance of his former self and purpose by succumbing to fear. He even told Catwoman that the symbol of Batman had to die, so that a newer Batman, a darker Batman, could arise from the ashes of the former to protect Gotham. In truth, a Batman lacking allies is a broken knight. A Batman without allies is the death of Bruce Wayne, the man right under. Arkham Knight, in my opinion, is a great story, possibly even the best out of the games, but it was never intended by Rocksteady to be the definitive ending of the series. It's not the perfect ending for Arkham Batman. It's the closing of a tragic chapter for a lost hero. Hope. The one thing that allows many to persist, Batman's true purpose, and the greatest form of energy in the entirety of DC's multiverse. At a macro level, hope is why I believe Batman returning in the Arkhamverse was the only course of action for his character. It showcases growth. It shows that he's not only gotten past the damage inflicted by Scarecrow in these past 5 years, but has also made strides to become a better, more hopeful Batman. His purpose isn't to be the all-defining solution. That's simply impossible given how deep evil runs within Gotham and DC. Instead, his calling is to be a part of it, and who better to take up the task of raising our fallen knight than the literal symbol of hope in DC, Superman. Clark was one of the people who reached out to Bruce during his time of solitude, convincing him to be a part of something bigger than himself, more noble than his own crusade, to bring back Bruce Wayne, to join the Justice League, the strongest, fastest, smartest, most skilled, and courageous of the world, who can not only deal with each other in fits of battle, but fundamentally keep each other honest, because at the end of the day, they're not infallible. Hell, no one is. They all battle internally with their flaws and daily struggles. I mean, look at Batman. Even with his growth, the interview tapes show that he's still somewhat distant. He still burdens and overworks himself. He still has fear toxin in his utility, and that contingency is still on standby. Difference now is that he has allies. People who can directly call him out on his BS, and him the same. Because deep down, he wouldn't want it any other way. This growth is much more pronounced when pertaining to his inner circle of Bat family members, who seem to have gained the greater trust of Bruce. So much so that he not only entrusted them with classified contingency plans of himself and his fellow Leaguers, but to carry out these plans in succession against literal planetary threats. Contrasting greatly with him previously fearing for their safety against the citywide forces of the Arkham Knight and Scarecrow. In closing, change could be a good thing, and in Batman's case, a great thing. Time and time again, we saw Bruce struggle to preserve his greater sense of self and his morality, and in his many journeys, stare into the unending darkness that pushed through the foul gates of hell. He fought, he prevailed, and for the first time he blinked. When he came to, he lost his allies, his home, his legacy, his way, and most of all, his hope. But through his everlasting persistence, he healed, came back stronger than ever to champion the light alongside the de facto hero team of DC. He even successfully plugged many of the deep wounds inflicted against himself and the Bat family while along the way. Of course, his scars are a different story. This is the most positive development he's had in all of his games. Off screen, yeah, but growth nonetheless. Progression that isn't quite over yet. Look not to the free flowless gameplay, the repetitive Brainiac boss battles, or the death of the Justice League. Look at Batman and realize that the tried and true method of a victorious Batman isn't his crazy gadgets, his contingencies, or the need to change into something more, something worse, a new myth at the behest of Gotham. It's his ability to rise to the occasion after falling, and to lend a hand while doing so.